In May, Charlie was concerned about Israel and their influence on American politics and how they were pushing things that he felt were in conflict with his beliefs, free speech. I think Charlie was definitely on the brink of changing some of his perspectives and knew exactly which donors were pressuring him and why.
Candace Owens just exposed Charlie Kirk's turn away from the Israel First mentality in the final days of his life. And in this clip, she talks about why we're not given the truth about this investigation and about this assassination. She also gets into the FBI's farcical narrative concerning this and what this means for all of us following the story and where it's going to lead from here. So let's get her take on this. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
And I want to be very clear that I believe, in fact, I know that towards the end, Charlie was fighting for custody of himself. I want to say that. I want to say that plainly. And there are lies that are being told and they need to be slapped down right now. There's one person who's been out there acting like he is a widow, just saying the absolute most, tweeting first about what happened to Charlie, following it minute to minute, and doing hits in a foreign country, right? Like making time to do hits on Fox News, 2 of them. Bibi Netanyahu who's fighting, I think, like an 84 front war with everyone, made a lot of time for Charlie Kirk. You would have thought they were the best of friends, as close as him and Trump were. But I will say I don't recall Erica mentioning Bibi Netanyahu in her speech. The way he's presenting it is like he was this is just the worst loss for him, but I don't think that is the truth. In fact, I know for a fact that he is misrepresenting some things that happened there towards the end. So let's at first listen to what Bibi Netanyahu, just one day, less than 24 hours after Charlie died, what Bibi Netanyahu had to say on Fox News. Take a listen.
We're just heartbroken. Myself, my wife, my family, my son actually, and his 2019 visit to Israel, had lunch with him and his wife, Erica. We're shattered first as human beings because a great human being has been taken from us. Was an extraordinary friend. He said, he wrote me a letter on May 2nd this year. He said, one of my greatest joys as a Christian is advocating for Israel and forming alliances to defend Judeo-Christian civilization. A few weeks before the tragedy yesterday, I called him and I spoke to him and I said, please come to Israel. I invited him to Israel. And sadly, that visit will not take place, but he was...
Yeah, I noticed that he didn't mention why that's not going to take place, according to the unnamed source that Max Blumenthal cited in talking to him, a close friend of Charlie. He turned that down, and that Netanyahu wanted to, put a big cash infusion into his organization, Turning Point USA. He turned that too, presumably because he didn't want more of a conflict of interest on this. Maybe his mental state was, shifting away from Israel. And I also noticed that he didn't note this. The fact that this unnamed source close to Charlie Kirk said that Kirk believed Netanyahu was trying to cow him into silence as he began to publicly question Israel's overwhelming influence in Washington and demanded more space to criticize it. He also said in the weeks leading up to September 10th, which was his assassination, Kirk had come to loathe the Israeli leader, regarding him as a bully. Also notable is the fact that letter he held in his hand, some people close to Charlie believe it's being misrepresented, including Candace Owens, and she wishes that he divulges the full context and the full transcript of it. That would be nice too. Of course, Netanyahu is a propagandist. You can't trust what he's saying. He's lying because he's moving his lips. I suspect this time's no different.
He was a defender of our common Judeo-Christian civilization. He was unbelievably excited to walk in the footsteps of Jesus here. He valued our bond, the bond between America and Israel. He did so many things to defend free speech. He had his truth. He stood up for it. But he said, you can come and debate me. He invited that debate. He certainly didn't invite the violence, the horrible violence that tried to silence him. And This is a worldwide problem. The people on the on the extremes, the Islamists, the radical Islamists, and their union with the ultra progressives, they often speak about human rights. They speak about free speech, but they use violence to try to take down their enemies. Whether it's President Trump, who's been almost assassinated twice, or they try to kill me here too.
Notice he's trying to pin this assassination on Islamists before the FBI has even named a suspect, I believe, at this point. I think this is right after the assassination. And the FBI didn't even arrest a suspect or conduct a narrative, and he's pinning it on Islamists. And we're supposed to just believe this and ask no questions, and he's going to get, the red carpet rolled out for him the next time he wants to speak in front of Congress, by the way. This vile war criminal. Again, this is preposterous, and I can't believe a single American that follows these things is willing to believe it.
But they got Charlie Kirk, and it's just heartbreaking.
Who is they, BB? Who is they who got Charlie Kirk? We don't have to actually speak conspiracies. I'm just wondering, because you said a lot there, but it really sounded like it was about BB trying to establish a narrative that we saw reinforced by a lot of people. That Charlie kind of made it almost sound like he died for Israel. I mean, Trump's account even tweeted out a photo of Charlie and an American flag and also an Israeli flag, a bit of AI used, like this is just who Charlie was. He says Judeo-Christian values. He spoke to him 2 weeks ago. Again, you would think he was busy fighting this 97,000 front war, but no, he's letting you know that he just randomly picks up the phone and calls Charlie Kirk and invites him to Israel? Why would BB do that? It seems like maybe there's a little more to the story. No.
Yeah, exactly. And according to Max Blumenthal, there was in his story again at the Gray Zone, he was saying that was designed to be a propaganda tour to kind of draw Charlie Kirk and his organization back to supporting Israel further than it had. In accordance with this backlash he got from the Turning Point USA event with Tucker Carlson and Dave Smith. And that's what they do with the AIPAC trips, too. It's very clear if you listen to people like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Matt Gaetz talk about this. They paint this rose-colored picture of Israel, with American legislators going over there. So they have them under control. They have their cultural sensibilities in tune with Israel over their own home constituencies. As they they're enacting a genocide in Gaza, bombing a negotiating team in Qatar, the only team that would negotiate for the hostages. They don't want the hostages back. They want to take that pretext off the table to continue the occupation in Gaza. They eliminated half the Yemeni government a few days ago. Just blatant assassinations. I'm sure we'd hear that, by the way. If Putin assassinated Starmer, we'd hear more about that in that case. They're trying to expand their West Bank settlements into Syria and Lebanon under the Greater Israel Project. Yeah, that's the truth.
There definitely is a little bit more to the story. First and foremost, that letter he is holding up, he is severely misrepresenting. Those sentences are real, but I am calling upon Bibi Netanyahu, the dear friend to Charlie Kirk, to publish the letter's entire contents. Don't start with just 2 sentences. Publish the entire thing. You're holding it. I'm saying you're severely misrepresenting the contents that in May, Charlie was concerned about Israel and their influence on American politics and how they were pushing things that he felt were in conflict with his beliefs, free speech.
And this does match with what we know in the timeline. We know that Charlie Kirk was one of a few key people that went to President Trump imploring him not to bomb Iran and not to execute a regime change operation in Iran, when that's what Netanyahu clearly wanted and had been calling for decades. And there's several tweets from Charlie around this time, I think shortly after May, but around this time frame, where he says, this is a disaster, and we know from the lessons of the past that regime change operations are wrong. So we shouldn't follow the people in power in Washington, implying, the pro-neocon Zionists control over our government by going along with this. And this was widely publicized at the time. Who knows how much influence it had over Trump. Trump ultimately did bomb Iran. I don't think that situation's gone away anytime soon, by the way. But it was people like Charlie that did that. Very important, influential figure that went to Trump and asked for that. Tucker Carlson did too, by the way, but Charlie did that as well. So we know in that way he was opposing Israel, certainly so. Of course, after that, we know, he supported Israeli propaganda in terms of denying that there was starvation in Gaza, saying that was only, Hamas propaganda. If you don't believe me on that, go to his Twitter, July 29th. He records a 12 or so minute video about that very subject. And there are some other things too, but in this way, that's true.
Here in America, Bibi's holding it up like Charlie just in May said, hey, you know what? I just want to write a love letter to Israel. That's how it was presented. Would you guys agree? That's not how it happened. Now, regarding that phone call and that invite, that also needs to be contextualized. And I'm going to do that. But first, Skylar, can we bring in a clip of Charlie from a month ago speaking about the kind of pressure that he was under? Because I think that will also help to further contextualize this. Take a listen.
I'm an American citizen. Yes, I want Israel to win. Yes, I'm a Christian. But some of the mess, and you've seen how I've been treated, Megan, by some, not all, by some.
No, it's very irritating.
It's
been so unfair.
You,
they were coming after you after Turning Point for, among other things, that you had Dave Smith there. Dave Smith is allowed to criticize Israel. You had both sides. The Israeli side was overrepresented.
Though. No, you're not allowed to. It's even worse than that. Again, I just want to
Yeah, that's right. The last thing that group wants you to do or be allowed to do is view both sides of that issue. To view both sides of the Israel thing, the Israel relationship, I think a toxic relationship, an unholy relationship. The last thing they want is the other side presented, and that's exactly what happened at that Turning Point USA event. So that's exactly what they can't have, and you can see his frustration about that here.
Repeat for the fifth time. I love Israel. I want Israel to win. But my moral character is now being put into question, Megan. Not my decisions. Not like, hey, are you doing this? Is it smart or is it dumb? But no, I am a bad person if I do this. And I could go, you saw it, Megan. It was trending on Twitter, thousands of tweets and text messages. And if I were to be charitable and generous, I will say the people that are attacking me are in a hyper-paranoid state because they're at war, and war tends to make things black and white, and you're a hammer looking for a nail. So I'm trying to be charitable, Megan. Literally, I'm trying to cut as much slack as I can, right? Like, okay, what would it be like if all of a sudden I'm starting to see a pattern of behavior similar to what my grandparents saw in 1930s Germany online? How would I behave? So that's like my charitable kind of overcompensation spirit. At the same time, I'm like, but it's not defensible to be dumb, right?
Yeah, notice though that he likens this to, Germany and the Holocaust and, fears of that when there is a genocide in Gaza. But you can hear his anger leap off the pages here. This frustration he's feeling from people that are saying he's not pro-Israel enough, presumably because of the backlash over this. And again, the Gray Zone article, great article by Max Blumenthal, talks about that. After that event where Tucker Carlson not only said Epstein was probably working for Israel, but also that it's not anti-Semitic to criticize Israel. And in fact, we should criticize Israel. And then Dave Smith in that debate with Josh Hammer, the neocon shill Josh Hammer, and Dave Smith in the debate getting more applause than Josh Hammer, the neocon, classic pro-Israel neocon. Even when Dave Smith makes the point that Trump was covering up for a sex trafficking ring, a child sex trafficking ring, that got more applause than anything Hammer said. And I think that is so telling. That is so telling where younger conservatives are at compared to older conservatives or the traditional, Israel-controlled Republican Party. I have no doubt that this happened. And as Max said here, Kirk was bombarded with furious text messages from these donors and financiers, and he was frightened by the backlash. Again, this is from an unnamed source that talked to Max Blumenthal. We also know from another unnamed source that talked to Harrison Smith of InfoWars, who, by the way, is a different unnamed source than the one that talked to Max. Presumably, Harrison claimed that, so presumably it was because he asked his source, did you talk to Max too? And it wasn't. But he claimed that Kirk was scared that Israel would murder him for his recent change in positions here. So we know a lot of this lines up with the narrative.
No, it's not defensible to be dumb. And he was under an increasing amount of pressure, not just people telling him, oh, well, you know, I'm upset with who you're inviting, but flat out telling him that he was not allowed to invite certain people to his events. They were threatening to pull out money. Charlie was getting a lot of really nasty text messages, and many of them pertaining to Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens. But Tucker Carlson was really the focus when it came to America Fest. How could Charlie allow these debates about Israel to take place? How could he allow Dave Smith, who, by the way, is Jewish, how could how could Charlie allow this other position to meet the stage? Because obviously when people start to hear the debates, what Dave Smith is saying sounds so rational, but it was up to Charlie to not allow those things to happen.
Yeah, the last thing a pro-Israel organization wants is an Israel debate. That's the truth. There's no doubt about that being the case. And I would like to see what Charlie's family thinks about these things, by the way. These unnamed sources that were close to Charlie presumably are less close to Charlie than his own wife. And what he told his wife, I would love to see what she has to say about these things. And I'd hope she gets armed with as much information about this as possible, because the feds aren't going to investigate this. But if she, is persuaded that this is a major factor and a major concern in his life that frightened him, hopefully she can get her own private investigation that yields some answers on this, because I don't think the feds will if it's embarrassing whatsoever to Israel.
And that amount of pressure towards the end, as you see that conversation he had with Meghan was just a month before he lost his life, really, I would say, reached a pinnacle of sorts on the matter of what Tucker Carlson actually said on that stage. Tucker Carlson, while he was on that stage at Turning Point, brought up Bill Ackman. Bill Ackman is a billionaire, obviously. He is also an extremely litigious billionaire. And Bill Ackman was on Charlie about comments that Tucker Carlson had made on that stage. Tucker Carlson specifically asked the question, where does Bill Ackman's money come from? Who is this guy? Actually, who is this guy that has this much influence? And like I said, Bill Ackman was not happy about this. And so I would like to contextualize Bibi. Again, these are things Bibi brought up publicly, which he didn't have to. He didn't have to bring up the letter. He didn't have to bring up the phone call, but he chose to do this less than 24 hours after Charlie Kirk was shot. Personally, Bibi, I would have appreciated if you guys used all of your spyware, you've been spying on us for years, to maybe track down the killer. But I guess this is where you thought it was best to do a little propaganda for Israel would be better than us helping us track down the killer.
Yeah, and blaming Islamists at the same time before any suspect was apprehended. That too.
But anyway, so Bibi Netanyahu in that phone call, what took place was a couple of weeks ago before Charlie lost his life. Charlie was in the Hamptons, and he had more than one event, but he had essentially what was staged, an intervention was staged by Bill Ackman, because Charlie's rational thoughts about Israel were a no-no. This is not the route that you should be going on. And Charlie was surrounded by his friends, his quote-unquote friends. Bill Ackman was very upset, and threats were made. That is what I am told, and I will tell you that I am very happy for Bill Ackman to dispute this narrative. In fact, he was asked to dispute this narrative. Max Blumenthal went out to him today, and Bill Ackman came back and said, I have receipts I can show you, and he did not provide the receipts. This is not how it went down. I know it went down this way. I'm waiting for one of them to go on record and to say that it didn't go down this way.
Yeah, I think she's also reached out to Seth Dillon, another very fanatical pro-Israel Zionist that was a part of this intervention in some way to try to recapture the conservative movement that was clearly drifting away from supporting Israel at all costs, hell or high water. And we'll have to see what comes from it. I say publish everything. Publish all the transcripts, your communications with Charlie. I'd love the unnamed sources to, at least consider coming forward and putting a name to your face. I get that, you're scared. And I would be scared too in this situation, considering Israel's immense influence over the U.S. and AIPAC and Zionists, but at least consider it. You know, if you're out there to fight for Charlie, we might not get any answers unless there's a lot of people that buy into this, and a lot of people, you know, unfortunately won't, given that it's unnamed. But we have this information, we have it regardless, even if it's, you know, anonymously. I hope it's provided to his family such that they can go after this.
It was at this time that Bibi Netanyahu was called and Charlie was invited to Israel. This was an under duress situation, I would say, because I've been in these situations before. When I started asking very sensible questions about Israel, as someone who had dedicated her political life to supporting Israel, many times alongside Charlie Kirk, I was met with the very same pressure. And just like Charlie was being invited to Israel, I was invited somewhere else. And when this arrived to me, it felt like a threat. You know, I got to tell you that. It felt like a threat, like not like, hey, come here and we can educate you because you're my friend. More like, this is your last chance. That's how it felt to me. I can't speak to how it felt to Charlie. And I know that Charlie was offered a ton of money in this moment. A ton of money. Bibi would fund it, you know, spend tons of money. And Turning Point, I guess, if it needed to go to a higher level, would have gone to an even higher level than it already was at. And I know for a fact that Charlie denied that funding. That Charlie denied, and what Bibi didn't include there, he declined to go to Israel.
Yeah, that is true. And some people that have talked about this story, like George Galloway, and I love George Galloway, by the way. I think he's an anti-war hero. In his video, he said that Charlie Kirk was concerned about a financial collapse of his organization. I haven't found anything to confirm that, but we know, according to this unnamed source, that a cash infusion was proposed and that Charlie said no. And indeed, he turned down the acceptance of going to Israel, this invitation from Netanyahu. But just wanted to add that context.
Or I would describe this as like, you know, re-education camp. You know, we've seen it. You made an uh-oh, but we can help you. You know, we just need you to come out to Auschwitz and take a picture. Yeah. We just need you to come to the Holocaust Museum and take a photo. We just need you to go to Israel and we can make this better.
Yeah, not through the crossings and into Rafah or Gaza City, though, that are clearly annihilated, that Anthony Aguilar calls the apocalypse zone because of the genocide and the destruction and the warpath and the bloodshed, all financed by the U.S. and Netanyahu. They wouldn't take him there. That'd make for a pretty bad photo op, actually.
Charlie said no to Bibi. Okay. Bill Ackman, if you would like to dispute that, I would love to hear what you say happened. Because our sources and what we have, it's solid, okay? There were conversations that took place, messages that were sent at that time, and they are solid. So you see, I went out to Seth, but I also went out to two other people who were at this meeting, and nobody is willing to go on record. They're all messaging each other, trying to figure out a coordinated response to say that, no, this was all quite cordial, but no one wants to go on record and describe it as cordial, because they know someone's leaking, because someone's got a guilty conscience about what happened at the Hamptons. So I will again put it out there, Seth, Bill Ackman, and to the other individuals who I have not yet named, but who are going to be named later this week, who were at the Hamptons when Charlie was put under pressure, when Bibi Netanyahu called him and invited him to Israel, again, in a move that when it happened to me, and it wasn't Bibi Netanyahu, felt to me like a laced threat. I am inviting you guys, I will give you my platform, actually, to come clear matters up, to tell us what really happened. Because, you know, I think Charlie was definitely on the brink of changing some of his perspectives. And I can tell you factually, Charlie was praying the rosary. Charlie was going to Mass. One of my last conversations with Charlie was me joking with him saying, just make the last step, okay? You are, I said specifically, you're too smart to be a Protestant. Just take the last step, Charlie.
Well, this Protestant takes exception, but fair enough. And, with Charlie, there's no doubt he was asking more questions and expressing much more frustration about the pressure that he got from pro-Israel donors toward the end of his life. I think that's very fair to say. Candace is being responsible as a friend to say that, and we know that's true regardless of what Candace says or this Gray Zone article. You can just take what he said on Megyn Kelly's show. Just again want to add the context. There was many things in which they shared the pro-Israel viewpoint and pro-Israel propaganda in that segment. It's on August 6th on Megyn Kelly's show. Full episode with Charlie Kirk. They doubled down on some of the pro-Israel propaganda, talking about how it's not a genocide and you can't trust any of the pictures coming out of Gaza. But that still, he also was asking more questions. And even asking questions is enough to put the crosshairs of the Israel lobby on you, proverbially, in the United States. They want a strict line, a rigid line that you have to toe. And having a debate between Dave Smith, one of the greatest anti-Israel debaters in the world, with a neocon is not the way to make people toe that line, especially people that watch these presentations and are part of Charlie's organization.
He says, you're speaking about Mary. And typically when those steps start taking place, you stop referring to yourself, as I did, as a Judeo-Christian. Again, it is mystifying why Bibi was out there doing the absolute most to make sure that Charlie was basically remembered as, I would argue, like a Jew, has not been yet mentioned. I didn't hear that. Erica was very clear that Charlie was a Christian, and I believe.
That's true. I don't exactly think it's mystifying while Netanyahu's trying to do that, though. He's a master propagandist, and I hate to say much of it has worked. Much of it has pinned the blame for all of his atrocities on Hamas, no matter how many countries he bombs, no matter how many people he starves, no matter how many foreign policy blunders he draws my country into and my criminal government into. There's still the Israel first mentality in the U.S. so deeply entrenched in our political system, with AIPAC and the Israel lobby in such control of the bureaucracy, the presidency, and our Congress. It's not exactly mystifying, but it would be to any reasonable person. Candace Owens is that on this issue for sure. It'd be mystifying to basic human reason to understand how he gets away with that, but I guess not mystifying as to why he's doing it. We all know why he's doing it.
Charlie obviously was very much a Christian, and that things are not being told truthfully. In fact, I will also call upon, since we're having fun, Turning Point USA to release the audio of what Charlie Kirk, because I was in communication with Charlie at this time, because I knew exactly which donors were pressuring him and why, exactly which people, that they were insisting Charlie allowed to speak at his event and why, when Charlie did not necessarily want those people to speak at his event. Okay. I'm calling upon Turning Point to release the footage of what Charlie said to Tucker Carlson before he hit the stage. Before, all of that craziness and the response to Tucker Carlson's remarks played out. Charlie was mic'd. Surely Tucker Carlson was mic'd. I know Charlie's mic'd the entire time at those events. So I'm asking for everyone to just release Charlie in his own words.
Yeah, that would be so important. There's nothing I care about more or hope for more in this whole saga than that information is divulged, that there's transparency from parties involved, including, Seth Dillon and Bill Ackman and these unnamed sources, providing as much as possible to his family. Because regardless of what you think about Israel's culpability in his murder, his vile, criminal assassination, just that we all saw in 4K, the first political assassination of that caliber that we saw in 4K, so horrifying, so senseless, so unjustifiable in every way, that we understand the pressure that these leaders of organizations on the right are put under by pro-Israel donors, by the Israel lobby, how much they're steered by the mighty dollar to support Israel at all costs. We need that information in front of the public such that we can drift away from this toxic and pestilent and pernicious mentality that dictates our foreign policy for us, deprives us of sovereignty, and makes us into empire builders rather than, I don't know, a country that's trying to maintain a humble, non-interventionist republic that the founders wanted. That'd be nice.
I feel like that's pretty fair, right? Let's stop saying how Charlie felt, and instead, if you're going to hold up the letter, release it in its entirety, okay? Why don't you release your messages, Bill? I'll release mine. Let's all just be very forthcoming about what took place. In fact, I'm calling upon Tucker Carlson to speak about that. I know what Charlie said to him, and I'm sure Tucker Carlson won't lie about it. What did Charlie say to you? Dave Smith, what did Charlie say to you? What was Charlie? Did he seem like he was treading in the direction? Like, do we feel like what BB is saying is honest, a representation of what Charlie was going through?
Yeah, I'd say no. I mean, there's this desperate attempt, and it's not just Netanyahu. You see an identical response from Ben Shapiro, making Charlie Kirk into the most pro-Israel person that ever existed, including people like Ben Shapiro and Mark Levin, and he wasn't that. He was a pretty stalwart Zionist, I'll say that. He has a track record of that. For the 22 months after October 7th, there were few defenders on the right more rigid on their support for Israel. You could even see it in those interviews people are pointing to indicate, a turn against Israel that they're talking about, which I think's a little overstated. I've said that in several interviews. He was raising questions, but I don't think it represents a turn against, Israeli policy and the U.S. Israeli ventures like in Gaza whatsoever, actually. But we know that there is ruffles in this story, that they're not being truthful about that. We need more transparency. And as we call for that, both Netanyahu and Shapiro are trying to recapture a movement they see slipping out of their fingers. They see the Zionist control over the right losing its grip. It's like a rock climber that's losing his grip, and almost just before the moment of it happening, their grip being completely lost and them falling off the cliff and to their doom. That really is where Zionism is right now. And it doesn't seem like that. It hasn't manifested politically, but culturally that is what is happening. And some of these people are seeing the writing on the wall. Younger people are not buying into this anymore. It's mostly old boomers in terms of generalities that are. I know there's going to be exceptions. People will complain about that and act like I just said every boomer supports Israel. I didn't say that, but the demographics are clear. Every poll shows that younger conservatives do not embrace this kind of doctrine to the same extent that their elders that watched Fox News 24/7 for about 20 years did. And that's just the truth. So a lot of people think that, the Zionist project, the Greater Israel Project, the attempt to actually expand Israel's borders that has been called for since Theodore Herzl and, David Ben-Gurion mentioned and wrote about, is slipping out of their grasp, and they only have 10 or so years to make it happen. And the time is now to salvage that by any chance possible. And part of that is to make Charlie Kirk into the most profuse pro-Israel martyr of all time. And he is that to some extent. He was very pro-Israel, but he's also more skeptical as the end of his life came to be. That is the truth, but I do want to hear about what you have to say. Let me know down below. Is Candace Owens right? Was Charlie Kirk really turning against Israel, or just being a little bit more skeptical about it and frustrated about the pushback and backlash he was getting? Does this indicate a change? Was he, willing to discard what his views on Israel were in the future? Let me know in the comments down below. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel. Also subscribe to Candace Owens. Great presentation, Candace. I really appreciate her for how forthcoming she is, how personal she is. Though dealing with the death of a very close friend to her, it's kind of heartbreaking in a lot of ways. But if I know Candace, man, she's a viper. She won't stop biting until she gets answers. She's going to be relentless. That's what we love about Candace the most. Keep it up. Please also consider becoming a YouTube member. If you click the join button below, you can join the channel, become a member, support me, and I'd really appreciate that. I'll even tip my hat to you for doing that. And in return for that, I'll give you access to all of my videos before they go live to the general public on my channel. Those are the members only videos. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. Catch you in the next one.